Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. So it's been a long time. I know. Well, first of all, it's been a little while since we had a meeting. We had that cancellation in the first meeting in November, and then we came to this one, which was the quickest meeting since I've been mayor. Now, in fairness, the one meeting I missed as mayor was T.J. Walker. I think he was mayor pro tem, and I think that was maybe 5 minutes, but 14 minutes. Nobody came to speak, which is just an unusual experience.
Right.
Basically, a consent agenda. We did recognize, Mr. McCotter in terms of, his passing and what an instrumental figure he was in the city of Rocky Mountain and also Point of Sproul. But other than that, it was largely, stuff that, approving contracts that we just got, really is non-negotiable. We got to have fire trucks, period, that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was unusual. The only real event I think occurred was maybe the appointment of Teresa Austin Stokes to the planning board and also Angela Carmichael to the redevelopment commission.
Yeah.
That was your appointment, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and appreciate both of them for willing to serve.
Absolutely.
But the other big ones, we appointed our city attorney, Colin
Yes,
McGrath
we
from
did.
Porter and Sproul. He's been the, I guess, interim.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interims. City attorney after Jet Rose is semi-retired. He's still practicing. So,
Right.
Porter and Sproul's, but obviously you just mentioned Mr. McCotter
That's right.
and Jep, and then Jep's been the city attorney since 1976 all the way up to 2024. And then now Colin McGrath, and I don't know who might have been before Mr. McCotter. I'm not sure.
Well, that would be almost before our lifetime.
Almost.
But close enough.
But Porter and Sproul's a local. In fact, they used to be in this building that your business is in.
Right.
Long time Rocky Mount law firm, and located here, and got a lot of depth.
And you were instrumental in pushing that over the finish line. And I think that's right. I mean, it is a Rocky Mount firm. I think that's important. Multidisciplinary firm. So, we have so many other issues.
Right.
We currently deal with a lot of other people at Porter and Sproul. So why not just keep it all in the family? And,
Right.
So anyway, that's exciting.
Yeah.
But the real work was the committee of the whole. So while we had a 14-minute meeting, I think we had a marathon committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. And as much as I give you a hard time for having long meetings, I deserve everything you're giving.
Well,
me.
I just was trying. I'm glad you picked up on all that.
Yeah. So,
but I'll point out I was not your problem.
this time.
That's right. This time.
So we began the committee of the whole with Ken Hunter going over the first quarter revenues and expenditures, and everything from what I saw was pretty much there. There was a couple of things that might have been
well, I think it's consistent. I think we've and this is a process. I think we've got to refine it. It's hard to report revenues and expenses like you would kind of in your business because they're so out of whack, right? We collect taxes the first quarter, and then we spend it all for the rest of the 3 quarters. And then how do you make sure that it's within budget and how that's being managed? And we still have payroll challenges. We still have some other things that, we've got to work through.
Right. But, I think we're, from what I saw, we're in good shape. And then right after that, we had an update on our status of the audit, which we're gonna be late, but we had an extension from the LGC, received one from the LGC. So, and that's because we're out without a finance director, and we've kind of short-staffed over there.
And it's a new firm, right? So they're having to learn us. They're looking at different stuff. They asked for the extension. It's tight. But anyway, again, the LGC, to your point, did approve the extension, and it's something that we clearly need, to make sure. I'd rather have it right.
Correct.
And a little late, and I'd rather, and be in compliance with the LGC than try to rush through something and it not be where it needs to be.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
So, and then we moved on to the housing policies, which, as we spoke before, it took about, that was the majority of the time that was spent going over the urgent repair, housing repairs, both minor and major, and then discussing the matching rebate. And it was an in-depth presentation.
In-depth is the way to say it. And there were some requests of changes. Now, I got to tell you, I sat through that, which is probably an hour plus conversation, and I'm still missing some pieces and parts of it. But what I recall, what I believe I've heard, is that the urgent repair program, which we've always had, is for folks. I need to go back and look at it. What percentage of AMI qualifies you for the urgent care? But
80, no.
I think it was like 60% or less.
Right.
I think that's right.
Right.
And, you can receive up to $12,000, I believe it is, or $14,000 in the grant. And that goes to basically replace roofs, windows, HVAC systems. Apparently, we're top 3 in every single category, which I thought was interesting. And so, there was some conversation about that. The housing repair, the minor, same thing. We have it, but it's a different AMI percentage and a different pot of money.
Right.
Then there's a matching program up to $50,000, but that means that individual has to spend $50,000, and then we'll match it 25% or $25,000 if you got to the 50. So that was important to know, and so those are basically what we have. And then I think the component or the idea was, let's change the way that we are looking at these programs and maybe redefine both how much money we're willing to finance, as well as what the percentages need to be, and tie it to some sort of AMI. Now, that matching program has no income limitations currently.
Correct.
And so I still haven't seen, and I saw this. So the thought was we'd increase the urgent care. We would break it down into 4 different components, right? So there's the urgent repair program. We would increase the assistance up to $20,000 from, I believe it's 14. We would go to the housing rehab program, which would still be matching up to $50,000, but we would stop that if you can't have greater than 80% of the average median income in the area. So the average median income, the median for the city of Rocky Mount, I looked it up last night, for an individual is roughly $51,000.
Right.
And so, and then of course, if you have more people, then the numbers move around. There's a sliding scale that folks can look at.
Right.
And then we're going to have a housing repair program and a workforce housing program. We're going to combine those, and you could expand the eligibility from 0 to 120% of AMI. I was not clear, and I think it'll be coming forth, and maybe you heard something different. I was not clear on exactly how much we're expanding this to, if it was ongoing. I know we were pulling some money. The request is pull some money from the rescue funds, some money that we had allocated from the operational budget that we have currently. And so maybe you could talk about that, because I got a little confused as to, I think it's budget neutral for the fiscal year based on the budget we have on our operating stuff. But there's a request for additional income from rescue monies and from some HUD monies, basically.
Correct, because if I remember correctly, we have, I believe it was about $1.5 million that we've allocated for housing, and just with these 2 programs that we were going to allocate, I think it was $300,000, then $150,000. So we're going to spend about half of what we have for these housing programs, which, as I mentioned, I'm an advocate of, if we've got the money, there's no reason for us to sit on it.
Sure.
I mean, we need to go to deploy that money, allow it to do something good within our community. And I think everyone agrees upon that.
Well, I do conceptually. I mean, I've got maybe personally just a slightly different take. Now, in my current position, I'm agnostic. I mean, the idea is to keep housing stock good. And to make sure we have people living in the community. And because we don't want houses that are boarded up, we don't want empty lots, we don't want blight in communities. So if these programs help folks, and that's a good thing. And we have a lot of people that are older that don't have any real sources of income, and this is a way for them to obtain some resources. The challenge is, it's just like a homeless challenge. Where's the end of it? I mean, there's not enough money to fund it. The government can't do that in and of themselves. And so the whole thing is a Band-Aid, which is where I get to the place. And I think that we talked about it, and I think we'll probably move into that. Well, what is the big plan? What are we really trying to achieve? And then let's engineer that backward to come up with the outcome that we want. And I still didn't hear anything that I thought was clear on that, But yeah, I mean, it's working. I mean, people are using the program. It matters. It is helpful to people. And the idea is that we keep housing stock, in a good place.
Right. And it's also, I agree. And then going
Yeah.
off of what you said, we got to start partnerships.
We do.
And we need to let the private sector come in here and do what they can, whether that's some matching funds,
Right.
or either some grants that we can help low income
Right.
folks or people that are right at AMI get some secured loans so they can go out and do these things, much similar to, paying off medical debt or things of that
Right.
nature, because it's needed. And people, to your point, it can't all be, we don't have enough money.
And we can't possibly tax enough.
Right. We can't tax enough. So that's why we've got to enter the partnerships. And that's why when we get on to the next one, we are partnering with the housing authority on some stuff, which is, I know you appoint that whole entire board.
I do. And I think I've got a great board over there, some really smart people, real insight as it relates to property management, money, and lots of other things, and development.
Right.
But before we leave that, I mean, so you're right. I think it is about private enterprise. I also think it's about, thinking a little bit outside the box. So, and I'll just give you an example that I'm not smart enough to have figured out my own, but so I went to a young presidents organization, which is funny that you would even call it young, but anyway, because I was there.
Oh.
Yeah, youngish. Once upon a time young. How about that?
Okay.
Anyway, and the idea was, how do you marry business with social action and trying to help those around you and build better communities? That was basically the theme.
Right.
And so there was one group panel discussion, and it was run by a friend of mine, Clay Grubbs, out of Charlotte, who's a large developer. And so it was like, how about taking Section 8 housing vouchers, and we don't even use all of ours in Rocky Mount, and apply it to something like the Bassett Center? That's actually a home.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have unused vouchers, why couldn't that individual qualify for Section 8, then pay UCM, which then becomes a more sustainable model? The city doesn't necessarily have to fund that in the traditional way that we're doing it. And then could you expand their program? Now, that's just an example. Now, I don't know if any of this is legal in the state of North Carolina. So this was this is somebody from California and Georgia that we're talking on it particularly. But as an example, if that's legal and if it requires some seed money and we have these homeless challenges, that may be a way to kind of augment public money, private money, to all get it to a place that we are doing a better job. I don't think you ever fix homelessness.
No.
And I don't think you ever have enough affordable housing.
Right.
I mean, so anyway, it's about all of that. And I would love to see a group sit down and really try to solve that, a think tank of some sort. I think that would be interesting. To see what kind of innovative projects you could get to, and how could you get the private segment to come in and do some investing on these things.
Right. Well, to your point, you've got to get creative. It sounds like, you've been involved in some, listening to some creative ideas, and maybe, to your point, we need to sit around the table and talk about it. It sounds like our retreat might be centering a lot on the housing piece.
It could be, but one of the things I'll say is really frustrating, though, is that we can't all get together and just talk kind of offline, and it makes it hard to have these conversations because I can't talk to more than you and two other people that are on council and so on. Well, it just kind of makes it disjointed, which is a little frustrating if you're really trying to move the ball. Yeah, look, I fully appreciate public notice and all the legislation associated with that and the reason for it. I mean, all that's important, but it does make it difficult.
It does. But to your point, we've got a tall order, and all we can do is stick a Band-Aid on it. But I do like, and I know we'll talk about it in a minute, but I do like the partnering, and I like the opening up of the housing authority, because we, the city of Rocky Mount, as a body, are not experts in housing.
No.
Because that's not all we do. Now, we've got some intelligent people over there and doing some great work.
And on council.
Right. But I think if you had someone like the housing authority that focuses on that, and we can all agree and partner with that, and they have the staff and really the software that they can use that with, I think it makes sense if we can make it work.
Well, it does. Well, and the other thing I don't think people really understand is that the housing authority is on a separate board. It has the ability to actually raise bonds. I mean,
Right.
it could go out and raise bond money for development. It has its own CDC, Community Development Corporation, which is different. It has to be by law, but it's managed largely under the same group. They're in the
Right.
property management business and certainly
Correct.
affordable housing. And so, and they have, I think, a very good board over there. So, to the extent we can bring them in as a partner with the city of Rocky Mount,
Right.
and and this really ties to what Peter's idea was, or really his idea in terms of the redevelopment board, which is, I think we've had a long time. So I mean, it's not the original thought, but it's more of a, hey, look, let's get serious about that again. So just so folks understand, we have a redevelopment commission and have had, and that is a requirement the state requires us to have those individuals of that board in place. But if we designate areas within the city as being redevelopment, what's the term? We'll just call it redevelopment zones for lack of a, that's not the proper term, but basically segment or isolate or areas within the city and say, okay, this is going to be a redevelopment zone. That allows the city to now go in and actively engage in acquisition, redevelopment activities toward a goal. We can exercise a lot of, a little bit more muscle to make that happen.
Right.
And the redevelopment commission can be part of that. They can act as agents for the city council and basically use those same tools that the city council would have and do everything right up to the point of bringing it to council and get the final approval.
And the funding.
And the funding. Well, that's right. I mean, that's right. I mean, without the funding, it's really largely a moot issue. However, I think that we have enough challenges out there that we really need to work on. The thing that was surprising to me was looking at the chart of I can't remember. You probably
Talking
looking
about
at
vacant houses.
I am the vacant lot. Was that surprising to you?
Yeah, it was right. And I think Councilman Harris was even talking about it sure would be interesting to see like an aerial view of that areas, because we do have in parts of the city a lot of vacant areas that could be developed, and we need the housing, obviously. So why don't we do it? Or better yet, if we, and it would be also, and we have a lot of land that the city owns. Yeah. We ought to deploy that to groups that can do large swats of area of land at one time. Yeah. And that's where we would have, I think, to Peter's point, we would have a sizable impact instead of just a Band-Aid here and there.
That's right.
And why not?
Right. And what I believe, you talk about the private sector coming in, what I believe is that once you kind of go through that, I don't know what the critical mass is, 30%, 40%, 50% redevelopment. At some point, private parties come in and say, well, this now feels like a stable environment. I'm going to go in and I'm going to invest. And that's really how you start leveraging those resources. And then you back up, you go to another area and just, kind of keep on keeping on. I think in a microcosm, the Berkshire project really has been very successful, largely funded by that neighborhood, and we've helped. But I think that's an example of how it can work.
What is the one that is being developed right now off Atlantic Avenue by the bank out of Durham?
Self-help.
Self-help.
Yeah, so they had bought they had a development arm once upon a time, and they had I don't remember, it's like 28 or some houses or some such as that, and they're in the process of Myrtle Avenue redoing some and selling them, and I understand that it's really working, and now that ties really to our down payment assistance program. And so we do provide some funding for folks to go in and make that initial down payment. Right. And that's allowed those projects to work. So self-help has gone in and do it, but that individuals who buy it may or may not be able to do it without that down payment. I mean, shoot, I remember when I was 20 something and working and, come up with a down payment. 20% of a house is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
I could cover a lot more than maybe my peer group on cash flow, but that's not necessarily the same as writing a check.
That's right. But the other thing, many years ago, I did an internship with Habitat for Humanity, and we have Habitat, and it was very active for many years here. Right. But if you take all these different organizations together and take those models and work together, maybe something could get done. And it's just a matter of getting everyone together. And it's also, the point also needs to be made that not anyone has to be in charge or get all the credit. It doesn't really matter. It's the end result that is what matters. Right. And how that happens, I'm not too sure, but we're on the right track. We just need to make it.
Well, I'll say it this way. I
quickly.
thought our discussion last night was very positive and impactful. And I felt like everybody was engaged and everybody was trying to solve for all the right reasons. How do we get there? Now, there's a lot of ground between here and getting over the goal line, like you're talking about. But you got to start somewhere. And I liked what I was hearing in a lot of ways. And I hopefully in our retreat, we will have a chance to really kind of beat this stuff over and over and over and get total and complete understanding. But I thought that the thought of increasing the amount of funds for the down payment assistance was pretty significant. And here's what folks need to hear, because I'm not sure that I've always been a guy who would buy into this type of programming. In fact, might even be a little resistant to it. Well, with the, hey, look, I had to work for it, daggone it, everybody else should, yada, yada, yada. What it does is it applies, we will loan you the money like a second mortgage for your down payment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you live there, if you stay there, we will forgive that over a period of time.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're getting people to put in roots and maybe traditionally transitional neighborhoods or transitioning neighborhoods or, neighborhoods where there's just a lot of turnover, and getting folks to put down roots and become homeowners. And I think that makes for better communities and better citizens. And at some degree, folks are paying for that, through time and through building communities. And so that's a small investment if we get there. And I got to tell you, it's taken me a long time. Really, it has personally for me to get to a place where that was even a conversation that I was maybe willing to entertain out loud. But as I look at our needs and as I look at our community, I think that it's a real benefit.
I agree. And to add on to that, if you don't live there, if you decide to move after,
you got to pay back.
You got to pay it back for whatever portion that is remaining on the amount owed. So when you sell the property, the bank gets whatever, and then the city gets the remainder of that money. So I agree with you. I mean, we certainly have our challenges, and we need to help in any way that we possibly can that's feasible.
Right.
To improve Rocky Mount, because with helping blighted communities also helps with the education. It also helps with the crime. It helps with the cleanliness of the city, attracting business, economic development. So that's the problem. There is no real silo, right? It's all interrelated, and they're all layers, and everything touches everything, and so it makes it kind of squishy. Yeah. But it certainly doesn't work in a 30-second soundbite. But with the housing policies and then also the other things that we were talking about, we're all talking about the age of the housing, and a lot of it had to go with 40 years. And I made the point last night, 40 years ago was 1984.
And I commented, I could have gone all night without really having that realization, because I graduated high school in 1985. So I'm at 39 years. And at that time I was 18, and I thought that I had all the world to live, and I guess I did, but it's that 40 years ago, that makes me feel old. Yeah,
but and I agree with you. You are older than me, but not much.
You can see it from where you're sitting.
I can. But I guess the point I'm making is the housing stock, most people live in homes that are, my home was built in 1978.
What is the average age of our housing stock in Rocky Mount? I gotta believe it's got to be close to 40. I mean, we have some newer housing stock, but not a lot. And when you look at the empty lots and you look at the population decline in Rocky Mount, I'm not sure that they don't correlate at some level.
So, and that's why I brought that up, because, really with these housing grants that we brought up, pretty much all of Rocky Mount might be eligible for the grants.
Very few neighborhoods aren't. I mean, I really do think that's, even Candlewood was started in the 70s, right? West Haven started in the 20s. Edgemont has been around since at least the 20s, if not before, maybe even early 1900s. And so, then you get to Swelton Heights, and that's probably the second oldest neighborhood in town, other than that Falls Road area. Inglewood, they were developing Inglewood when I was a child. So
correct. So we have a lot of opportunity here in Rocky Mount, and and the good thing is we're kind of all, seems like we're coming together. Yeah. So
we're at least finding issues that we can all agree on and try to drive it forward. Right. And that's really the whole point of governance, right? Right. I think.
Right. No, I agree. And then So we had that, and then we went over some nonprofit funding.
Well, let's talk about that, because I mean, there were some that didn't get funding that would otherwise. I think the theme of the day was about housing. So the charities that did get funded at more significant levels, we're dealing with homelessness, we're dealing with housing and starts, and how do you get people engaged. And I think that we have all noticed that there's a growing homelessness issue, and I don't think that's the proper term to use these days. But regardless, folks are not living in a traditional structure in the city of Rocky Mountain. We've got to figure out how to resolve, how to solve that, how to help that. I mean, I don't solve it, but anyway.
Yeah, we did in the meeting, that city council meeting, we did approve some grants, and then we also went over the summary report that we received, because the grants that we do give out, we require information back, and that's what was presented to us in the committee of the whole. So, that pretty much was the committee of the whole meeting, and then we did go into closed session and talked about several things. A lot of good things.
I think so. I mean, a lot of good things happening. A lot of good, a lot of good on the horizon. But look, we're running out of time. I mean, I feel like we just kind of begun to scratch the surface, but I want to tell you this: Happy Thanksgiving, man. And I really hope you have a great one, and I hope everybody out there gets a wonderful turkey and fellowship.
All right. Thanks, Mayor, and same to you.
Thank you.